You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, June 4th, 2021, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. It's also got to be a very special day in my personal history. Let me give you a little taste. Kick it.
Welcome to the show. So glad to have you here. We have got a great show to debut for you today on June 4th, 2012. It's just got to be 420 somewhere in the world.
That's right. June 4th, 2012 was the very first Russ Belville Show. It was my first independent podcast after having podcasted for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws for 4 years. And after leaving that job, had 3 weeks gap time between that and starting up the brand new podcast, which continues today, episode number 1005. 1005 episodes later, and here we are, knee-deep in marijuana legalization throughout the United States of America. And in today's show, for this 9th anniversary, we're going to take a look back with some clips from 2012 that give you an idea how far we've come when it comes to marijuana legalization. After our Cannabis Headline Newsweek, I'm going to give you an interview with Mason Tvert. He was the man who was behind one of the guiding forces of Amendment 64 in Colorado in 2012. I spoke with him in July of 2012 to get his preview of how the polls were looking, how the campaign was running for this campaign in Colorado that would become the first state to legalize marijuana for adults for recreational purposes. And folks, it was far from an accepted sure thing that we would get marijuana legalization passed. It was on the ballot in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, and the polls were really close. It was, a nail biter as to whether or not we would see marijuana finally get legalized. So we'll take a look at that in the Behind the Headlines segment. Then we're going to have an anti-drug public service announcement in the day before we get to the reactions to that historic legalization vote. In November of 2012, I ran some pieces on how Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and other officials in the state of Colorado, then Governor Hickenlooper, I should say, he's senator now, and how they reacted to Colorado passing marijuana legalization, some of their predictions for what might happen in the aftermath of that. So we'll take a look at that coming up on our segment right after the public service announcement. And then in the Radical Rant today, I've got to talk a little bit about this case that just happened in Gooding, Idaho, which is a kind of south central Idaho, Twin Falls area, where a sheriff's deputy has been placed on leave and is being investigated for his handling of a suspected road rage incident that led to him tasering a 78-year-old little old man. Literally, when you see the picture of the guy, he couldn't be more than 5'2", 5'3". So we will get that taken care of. Folks watching on the Facebook, I will take care of the audio as soon as I can. I don't know what the problem is. As soon as we get to the news, we'll work on the audio feed for you guys watching live. And then in hour 2 in Toker Talk Radio, we are going to take a look back October 2012, our marijuana election night preview, how we were looking forward to literally the week before legalization passed. We'll take a look at how we were looking at that. Also, in the second block, legalization night in Seattle. This was from December of 2012 when I went to the Space Needle and joined with a bunch of folks who gathered together waiting for the stroke of midnight on December 6, 2012, when marijuana officially became legal in the Evergreen State. And then we'll wrap things up with some big pharma ad of the day and an interview from August of 2012 with David Bienenstock, an editor with High Times Magazine, and their first ever cover to feature dabs. Oh my God, how much dabs have grown since then. But first, let's get to the news. This is your Cannabis Headline News, brought to you every weekday by Radical Russ Radio at radicalruss.com. your 24-hour source for marijuana music and cannabis conversations. Subscribe today for just $4.20 at patreon.com/radicalruss. This is your Cannabis Headline News for the week ending Friday, June 4th, 2021. I'm Russ Belville. A bill to federally legalize marijuana and promote social equity in the industry was reintroduced in the House on Friday. The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or MORE Act, sponsored by Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, was filed with a number of changes compared to the version that was approved by the chamber last year. The bill, which would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, allow people with cannabis convictions to have their records expunged, and create a federal tax on marijuana, with revenue going to support community reinvestment and other programs, comes as Senate leadership is preparing to introduce a separate reform proposal with similar objectives. President Joe Biden wants to maintain a long-standing policy that's protected state medical marijuana laws from Justice Department interference as part of his fiscal year 2022 budget proposal, a notable administration decision given that previous presidents from both parties have called for its elimination in their annual plans. But Biden wants to continue to block Washington, D.C. from using its own tax dollars to legalize adult-use marijuana sales, declining to recommend that current language barring such activity be eliminated. The budget approach is raising questions about whether the president is drawing a line in the sand by supporting medical cannabis states, but denying D.C. the right to implement sales as the mayor and local legislators want. If so, it would reflect his overall marijuana policy position: yes to medical cannabis, no to recreational marijuana. Biden did recommend removing a separate provision to block D.C. from using its tax dollars to provide abortion services, a decision that reinforces the notion that the administration took a targeted approach to the cannabis issue. Pro-legalization Senator Cory Booker is promoting President Joe Biden's pick to head the Drug Enforcement Administration as a champion of ending the war on drugs, even though she has publicly stated her opposition to even modest reforms such as state-level efforts to simply decriminalize marijuana. The senator, who is part of a congressional trio working on legislation to end federal marijuana prohibition, introduced the nominee at a confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee last week.
She is someone that gives me hope about our country, that we cannot be chained to the drug war policies of the past.
But when it comes to ending the drug war, DEA Administrator nominee Ann Milgram didn't exactly fit the bill when she served as New Jersey's Attorney General in 2007.
I would not support decriminalizing marijuana. I think when you look at the sentencing, and if you really actually drill into this, you would see that those are not the people who are generally incarcerated.
In fact, FBI data shows that hundreds of thousands of people are arrested for marijuana possession alone every year in the United States. A bipartisan duo introduced a congressional bill on Friday that would make clear that U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs doctors can discuss state legal marijuana programs with veterans. Representatives Connor Lamb and Peter Meyer filed the legislation titled the Fully Informed Veteran Act, which would allow VA doctors to provide basic information and resources about state legal cannabis programs to veterans. As far as veteran and marijuana-specific legislation is concerned, this is an especially modest reform. Under current VA administrative policies, the department's doctors are currently allowed to discuss cannabis with patients and document their usage in medical records, and those veteran patients are already shielded from losing their benefits for marijuana use. But the new bill would enshrine into law a more basic policy on providing information about cannabis programs for those who live in areas where it's legal. Amazon said on Tuesday that it will stop drug testing many of its workers for marijuana and will instead treat it the same as alcohol use. Quote, "In the past, like many employers, we've disqualified people from working at Amazon if they tested positive for marijuana use," Amazon said in an update posted to its company news site. Quote, "However, given where state laws are moving across the U.S., we've changed course," end quote. Amazon will now, quote, "no longer include marijuana in our comprehensive drug screening program for any positions not regulated by the Department of Transportation, and will instead treat it the same as alcohol use," end quote. It will continue to do impairment checks on the job and will test for all drugs, including cannabis and alcohol, after any incident. In addition to instituting the workplace policy shift, Amazon says it will also lobby Congress to pass a bill to federally legalize marijuana that was introduced last week by House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler. The governor of Tennessee has signed a bill to expand the state's limited CBD program and create a commission to study broader medical marijuana legalization. Governor Bill Lee signed off on the legislation weeks after lawmakers sent it to his desk. The enacted bill will allow patients with qualifying conditions to possess CBD oil that contains no more than 0.9% THC, which is 3 times greater than the federal definition of hemp. The current program's list of qualifying conditions will be expanded beyond intractable epilepsy to add Alzheimer's disease, ALS, cancer, IBS, MS, HIV/AIDS, and sickle cell disease. People would have to keep proof of their condition and a recommendation from a physician in order to possess the oil. But in order to obtain the medicine, Tennesseans will have to go out of state or obtain it illegally, as there is currently no means to lawfully purchase cannabis within the state. Oklahoma's Senate Bill 1033 has been signed into law by the governor, making several changes in the Sooner State's medical marijuana industry. It grandfathers in existing businesses as it pertains to the 1,000-foot school rule. The bill also lets businesses transfer licenses if there is a change in ownership. It will let the Oklahoma Tax Commission collect a fee so they can do audits on businesses. Plus, it lets the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority work with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics to crack down on illegal businesses. The new law, which went into effect immediately after the governor signed it, also says caregivers can only grow marijuana for 5 patients. The bill also protects doctors, stating they can't be punished for issuing medical marijuana cards as long as it's done according to law. The Illinois Senate passed a bill Friday creating new licenses and lotteries for marijuana dispensary licenses, addressing issues that have plagued the process set forth by a 2019 law legalizing recreational marijuana. House Bill 1443 would create 2 new marijuana dispensary lotteries, offering 55 licenses each, as well as clearing up ongoing disputes over the fate of 75 marijuana dispensary licenses that have been held up for over a year. The House previously passed House Bill 1443 on Tuesday. In a written statement Friday, Governor J.B. Pritzker said he looks forward to signing the bill, quote, so that we can begin the next phase creating a cannabis industry that reflects the diversity of all our people, end quote. After just 21 of more than 900 applicants were deemed eligible to participate in a lottery for the 75 licenses, legislative backlash from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus and Latino Caucus drove the Pritzker administration to pause the lottery and offer the chance for firms who failed to reach the threshold to resubmit their application. The Nevada legislature has sent a bill to legalize marijuana consumption lounges to the governor's desk. After clearing the assembly last week, the legislation advanced through the Senate in a 17-3 vote on Monday. Sponsored by Assemblyman Steve Yeager, the bill would create 2 new licensing categories for cannabis businesses in the state. One would be for retail cannabis consumption lounges, and the other would be an independent cannabis consumption lounge. Existing retailers could apply for the former license and sell products that could be consumed on site by adults 21 and older. Independent lounges could enter into a contract with an existing retailer to purchase and prepare ready-to-consume marijuana products for resale. Under the legislation, a person who has been adversely affected by provisions of previous laws which criminalized activity relating to cannabis is considered a social equity applicant. In the final days of Texas's legislative session, lawmakers sent bills to the governor's desk that would expand the state's medical marijuana program and require a study into the therapeutic potential of certain psychedelics for military veterans. Meanwhile, legislation to reduce penalties for possessing cannabis concentrates and update the state's hemp program that had been advancing failed to cross the finish line by key deadlines over the weekend. This rounds out an exceptionally busy legislative session for drug policy reform in the Lone Star State. While advocates are encouraged that lawmakers move forward with the medical marijuana and psychedelics measures, they remain disappointed that they were unable to pass more expansive cannabis bills, including a decriminalization proposal that cleared the House but saw no action in the Senate. A Louisiana bill to allow patients to access smokable medical marijuana products is heading to the governor's desk, while separate legislation to decriminalize low-level possession of recreational cannabis is also pending final action in the legislature. The House of Representatives gave final approval to the medical flower proposal in a 76-17 vote. The chamber passed an earlier form of the legislation last month, but the Senate amended it, meaning House lawmakers needed to concur in order to get it to Governor John Bel Edwards. A companion House-passed bill to tax medical cannabis flower is advancing through the Senate. Meanwhile, the Senate is also set to take up a separate decriminalization proposal that would make it so possession of up to 14 grams of cannabis would be punishable by a $100 fine without the threat of jail time. The House approved the measure by a vote of 67 to 25 last month. In a setback to companies hoping to enter one of the state's fastest-growing industries, the Florida Supreme Court ruled Thursday that state medical marijuana regulations are likely legal. In a decision related in the case of Florida Department of Health versus Flora Grown LLC, justices found that Flora Grown's challenges to state regulations did not have a substantial likelihood of success. It reversed a decision by the First District Court of Appeals to put those rules on hold. Flora Grown, which was denied a license to become a medical marijuana treatment center in 2017, argued that Florida's regulations do not comply with a 2016 constitutional amendment legalizing marijuana for medical use. More than 71% of voters approved that amendment. The Tampa company challenged the state's steep barriers to entry into the industry. A 2017 law regulating medical marijuana required that companies seeking licenses had to operate in every aspect of the business. Under the law, that meant companies had to cultivate, process, transport, and dispense medical marijuana. Wisconsin Republicans have again blocked the state from legalizing medical marijuana as part of the governor's budget proposal. On Wednesday, the GOP-controlled Joint Finance Committee voted against a motion to re-add the cannabis reform in the 2021 to 2023 budget plan. The action comes 1 month after the same panel first voted to scrap Governor Tony Evers' marijuana proposals, both the recreational and medical legalization, from the budget. The cannabis measures were among nearly 400 provisions that were proposed to be eliminated by the panel. This is the second time that the governor has included marijuana reform in his budget request, only to have that provision stripped by the Republican-led legislature. Locally, Wisconsin voters in 3 jurisdictions last year approved non-binding advisory questions in favor of marijuana legalization. Those moves came after Wisconsinites overwhelmingly embraced cannabis reform by supporting more than a dozen similar measures across the state during the 2018 election. Idaho activists have filed a new measure to legalize marijuana possession for adults that they hope to place before voters on the 2022 ballot. Meanwhile, a separate campaign to legalize medical cannabis in the state is also underway, with advocates actively collecting signatures to qualify that measure. The new limited recreational legalization proposal would make it so possession of up to 3 ounces of marijuana would be lawful on private property for adults 21 and older. Possession outside a private residence would generally remain criminalized, though the measure specifies that transporting a personal amount of marijuana from a jurisdiction where the marijuana was legally purchased would be legal. That's crucial because while there would be no place in Idaho that adults could legally purchase cannabis, they would be able to travel to dispensaries in neighboring states such as Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington and bring marijuana back home with them. A bill to legalize possession of psychedelics in California was approved by the California Senate on Tuesday. The legislation, sponsored by Senator Scott Wiener, which previously cleared 3 committees, passed 21 to 16 on the floor. If enacted into law, the bill would remove criminal penalties for possessing or sharing numerous psychedelics, including psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, ibogaine, LSD, and MDMA for adults 21 and older. The measure originally included record sealing and resentencing provisions for people previously convicted of psychedelics possession offenses, but that language was removed in its last committee stop last month as a part of an amendment from the sponsor. Mescaline, derived from peyote, is specifically excluded from the bill's reform provisions, quote, because of the nearly endangered status of the peyote plant and the special significance peyote holds in Native American spirituality, end quote. Rhode Island lawmakers introduced a new bill to legalize marijuana on Friday, with just weeks left to go in the 2021 legislative session. 2 sources familiar with the situation told Marijuana Moment that because time is running out, lawmakers are likely to reconvene in September to tackle the legislation, in addition to separate legalization proposals that have been filed by the governor and Senate leaders. The new House bill from Representative Scott Slater and several co-sponsors includes similar policies to tax and regulate cannabis for adult use. But in some respects, it seems to contain a greater focus on addressing social equity than the other measures, even if it doesn't contain everything advocates want. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for the week ending Friday, June 4th, 2021. I'm Russ Belville. Cannabis Headline News is heard at the top of every hour on Radical Russ Radio, and Friday's news is contained within the free Russ Belville Show live podcast. For daily downloads of Cannabis Headline News podcast to your device every morning, subscribe by becoming a patron of Radical Russ Radio. Thanks, everyone, for staying tuned. The Coffee Pod in Sumter, Oregon is your fast, friendly marijuana shop. Well, that caught me off by surprise. Hey, we're going to take a break here because, it's that time. 4:20 here in the Mountain Time Zone. And that means it's time for our union-mandated safety briefing. You got to be safe out there, especially when you're in America's last absolute prohibition state. Watch for the Smokey Bear out there. My friends from 50 years ago that were into Convoy and CB radio. They still use CBs anymore? I hope so. The Coffee Pod in Sumter, Oregon is your fast, friendly marijuana shop nestled in the beautiful Elkhorn Mountain Range outside of Baker City. We're serving Eastern Oregon and Idaho's Treasure Valley with the selection of flower, pre-rolls, vapes, dab, and edibles you need at the prices that make it well worth the drive. Don't venture to some well-watched parking lot in some border town dispensary just to take a number and wait in a long line for your cannabis products. Make the drive to the Coffee Pot in Sumter and deal one-on-one with your bud tender with no waiting. See, feel, and smell the products you're after and make your purchase knowing your tax dollars are helping a small tourist community that needs it. Plus, every dollar you spend is a point toward our Bong Bucks program that earns you coupons on glass and accessories. The Coffee Pot also honors our military, seniors, teachers, and first responders with a 10% discount. And as always, OMMP patients pay no 20% tax. Come on up to the Coffee Pot in Sumter, the first business on the left, on the side of the 2-story log cabin restaurant, and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I was asked by a group of children what to do if they were offered drugs. And I answered, just say no.
Okay, maybe you're high too.
Radical Russ here, reminding you that marijuana legalization doesn't just happen. Smart, dedicated activists have put their freedom and future on the line to make it happen. Like the activists at the Hemp Industries Association. Since well before the 2018 Farm Bill re-legalized hemp in America, the HIA has been fighting for the farmers and producers of hemp goods to be able to compete in the global hemp market. Learn more about their mission and get involved at thehia.org. And keep it here on Radical Russ Radio for conversations with leaders from this organization, the best marijuana music, and the latest news about cannabis.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Talk about a frenetic pace. It was just 9 years ago when we didn't have a single legal marijuana state in the United States. And in those preceding 9 years, we've got 18 legal marijuana states, many of them that have passed through legislatures now. But back in July of 2012, we weren't so sure that any marijuana legalization would pass. So this is a conversation that I had with Mason Tvert from the Amendment 64 campaign that sought to legalize marijuana in the state of Colorado. All right, folks, welcome. It's actually we're having our legalization week, and not so much at the legislature, but in this case with the people. And joining us here to talk about it, we've got Mason Tvert from Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, the Amendment 64 campaign in Colorado that would legalize marijuana for all adults 21 and over. Mason, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're on the ballot. We're going to legalize marijuana in Colorado. Can you tell us what the forecast looks like so far? Do you got some polling numbers you can reveal to us?
Well, generally, all the polling over the last 18 months has found that support is in the vicinity of 48 to 52%, and opposition is around 38 to 42%. But ultimately, we know that it's more or less 50-50. It's going to be a very close race, and it could go in 1 or 2 percentage points in either direction. So we're really doing everything we can to build as much support as possible so that we can have the best shot here in November.
All right. Are there any, is there a lot of undecideds in this to push, or is everybody pretty much galvanized at this point?
But ultimately, undecideds in this case are not necessarily people who don't know if they think marijuana should be legal or not. But in a lot of cases, it's people who understand that marijuana prohibition is a failure and appreciate that adults shouldn't be arrested for using marijuana, but still aren't quite sure of whether this is the right time or the right way, and really just need to have that affirmation. They need to hear from their friends and their family and other people that they trust that this isn't this is okay to do, and now's the time to do it. So we're really trying to get that word out there to these people because we know that they are supportive. We just need them to pull the trigger.
We've been showing the various billboards and playing your commercials as well, the Dear Mom, the Dear Dad ads, and we especially liked the Pat Robertson billboard. How have those billboards gone over, and have you seen any change in public opinion from them?
Well, they've gone over very well, and they've certainly served their purpose in that they've generated a whole lot of media coverage and, as a result, a whole lot of public dialogue. And ultimately, when people are talking about the issue, that is when we see support grow. So they've done their job in that they've gotten people talking, they've been in the news, and they've certainly conveyed messages that get people thinking about whether it makes sense to make criminals out of people who are simply using a substance safer than alcohol, and getting people thinking about having conversations with their parents or other family members about the issue. And of course, with the Pat Robertson billboard, getting people to think about the fact that support for ending marijuana prohibition spans the political spectrum. So they've done their job in that sense. We're not really spending our limited resources on polling to see if there's been any movement, but we are really pushing to keep that discussion going.
All right. We're speaking with Mason Tvert from Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Check out regulatemarijuana.org for more information, text to the initiative, and so forth. So you mentioned there was a lot of people that are supportive of the abstract concept that the war on drugs has failed, we need to regulate marijuana. But in the concrete, they're a little bit skittish, like, is this the right time? Is this the right measure? What are we doing to show them that the time is now and this is the right measure?
Well, ultimately we're doing a couple of things. We're trying to ensure that they're comfortable with marijuana itself. So we've spent really the last 7 years here in Colorado, but also the past several months, focusing on this message that marijuana is safer than alcohol. It's not a problem for adults who are 21 and older to simply use marijuana responsibly as they would have a glass of wine at dinner or a cocktail after work. And really getting people to just accept that and not be fearful of the notion that there will be marijuana use taking place. We've also been really hammering home some of the facts that are coming out here in Colorado about how regulation has been working. We've seen teen marijuana use decrease over the last few years as Colorado has regulated medical marijuana. And so we're trying to make sure that people are aware of this, and our opponents are screaming about how use will go up, when in fact the evidence shows that regulation results in less access and less teen use. So we want to make that clear. And then finally, we're really trying to, as I said earlier, provide that affirmation to people, mostly by getting people to talk to one another. We want people talking to their friends and their family members and their colleagues about how they do support this and they will be voting for this, and really just letting people know that it's okay to do that. We're also building a strong list of endorsements and so on, organizations, individuals that are supportive to make sure people are aware that they're not alone in supporting this, that it is experience a whole lot of support across the board.
You brought up the Colorado medical marijuana program, which is now very regulated and pretty much, an accepted way of life in most of Colorado. And I was wondering how that would play into the legalization campaign, in that what you're proposing as far as home cultivation limits, possession limits, isn't substantially different from what was originally proposed with Amendment 20, if I'm not mistaken, similar limits. Why is it tougher to convince Coloradans that healthy people should have the same limits as the sick people originally got?
Well, there's generally just always this notion that, well, for one thing, there's a lot of people who don't support it in either case. But there's really, a lot of people who have felt that they've been more likely to support reform when it's based on individuals who are suffering from debilitating conditions and so on. And really, when it comes down to it, is criminalizing people who are using marijuana to relieve their conditions and symptoms is perhaps the most egregious element of marijuana prohibition. So there's far more public support for that generally. But when it comes down to it, more and more people are seeing that this system is working. They're seeing it's not a problem. It's not causing any sort of increased crime. It's not resulting in increased teen use. In fact, it's decreasing. We just need to have that conversation, get more and more people talking about it, because the more they do, the more they come to understand that there's, it's just as much a no-brainer to regulate all marijuana sales as it is just with medical.
Yeah, it does seem to be mostly cultural and moral objections once you really get down to it. Mason, we reported on a story, Carrie Gallagher, our news director, brought it up, in Colorado, attack coming from your opponents trying to paint this as some sort of carpetbagging issue with, scary billionaire George Soros donating so much money and trying to help you guys out. I wanted to give you the chance to set the record straight on that with the whole George Soros attack.
Sure. Well, we actually haven't received any money at all from George Soros, but we certainly, if George Soros reads this initiative and decides that he supports it and wants to donate to this effort, that's certainly welcome. But as of now, we've not seen any money from him. So it's unfortunate. I mean, our opponents, I think something like 3/4 or more of the money that they've received has come from one extremist organization based out of Florida called Save Our Society from Drugs. And, this argument over where money is coming from is just irrelevant. I mean, the fact is we've got, tens of thousands of people in Colorado who are supportive of this. We've got thousands of volunteers now, hundreds of businesses, a long list of organizations and other local leaders that are supportive of this. And, it just goes to show that there really isn't a whole lot for them to work with. I mean, they're clutching at straws, and when they don't have any good arguments on the issue, they just resort to talking about things like that. So if that's the conversation they want to have, then that's great, because we're going to have a real conversation about marijuana, and they can just keep talking about money, and that's fine.
Well, Mason Tvert with the campaign in Colorado, Amendment 64, Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Folks, check out the website, regulatemarijuana.org. And I'm assuming they can make financial donations if they go out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're now, offering T-shirts and stickers and buttons to folks just for small donations. So you can check that out. And we're going to have some things that people can do to help out here online as well. So whether you're in Colorado or not, please check out the site.
Yeah, especially if you're not in Colorado. Folks, I hear people all the time, they're never going to legalize in Texas. They're never going to legalize in Virginia. Well, yeah, not until maybe Colorado does it first and then provides the blueprint for how it's done. We've got to legalize somewhere, and your money can help. So send it out here to regulatemarijuana.org. Let's get it passed, make it the true Rocky Mountain High in Colorado. It's going to be a game changer. It's going to change the world when even just one U.S. state legalizes marijuana. Now, Mason, on a personal note, how you holding up? How's the campaign treating you?
It's going great. It's getting very fast paced, and we're really coming down the home stretch. It's almost August. It's pretty remarkable that it's almost August, and we're 100 days away from the election, and we have a great team here that's going to be doing everything in our power to push it across the finish line.
If I can take you a little afield of this of the initiative for a second and get your opinion on a political matter. We have some pundits that are saying that Colorado might be kind of close as far as the presidential election goes, and with President Obama's raids against medical marijuana states, that there might be some swing there in Colorado. You got any thoughts on that idea?
Well, yeah, there's been a whole lot of attention to it because this issue can actually have an impact in a few different ways. Perhaps the biggest ways is, number one, it could be an issue that brings a lot of younger and non-traditional voters out to the polls who might otherwise not be voting but feel like they should, and that could be younger voters who otherwise would not vote at all, but it also could be people who might vote, college students who are still registered in other states but might want to re-register here in Colorado so that they have the opportunity to vote on this initiative. That's one side of it, which in theory would help Obama. Then on the other side of it is whether Obama's actions on medical marijuana and marijuana in general, and his general poor showing on the issue, will inspire a lot of people who might have otherwise voted for him to either vote against him, be it for Mitt Romney, or more likely for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, or just simply not casting a vote for president but voting for other things. So those are two hypotheticals that are being talked about quite a bit right now.
I also wonder about the on the other side of the aisle there, Mitt Romney. We played that clip of him, asking whether or not there were legitimate issues to talk about. How's that playing out there?
Oh, yeah. People certainly on our side of the fence against medical marijuana are by and large not going to be supportive of Mitt Romney regardless. At least Obama has acknowledged that there is a legitimate debate to be had. Of course, he hasn't treated it that way. But, I think that really what it comes down to is whether the administration really does more to upset this growing and already very large voting bloc. We've got tens of thousands of medical marijuana patients, at one point over 100,000, but roughly at 80,000 at any given time. That's a lot of people who are going to be upset if they continue to see Obama's administration taking negative actions against medical marijuana.
That's something we don't remember a lot, and that, again, was a 2012 clip from July, speaking with Mason Tvert, in advance of Colorado passing the first marijuana legalization in the nation. And it's something that, we got to recall is that prior to President Obama's second term, they were engaged in quite a bit of raids of medical marijuana providers in Colorado and California and other states. So much so that he had outpaced what President Bush had done, George W. Bush had done in his previous 8 years. So it wasn't a sure thing that we were going to get marijuana legalized. There was a lot of political opposition to it, even at that time. Now, after President Obama won a second term, of course, there was the Ogden Memo and the Cole Memo and the policies that still exist to this day of having kind of a federal hands-off of the states that are operating legal medical or recreational marijuana. But it wasn't a sure thing 9 years ago, let me tell you. All right, we're going to take a break, give you the anti-drug public service announcement of the day, and when we return, the reactions to legalization in Colorado right after the election from the governor and attorney general at the time, and then to close out the show, a radical rant on a terrible bit of police abuse of an elderly old man right here in Idaho. Stay tuned. Radical Russ here for the Idaho Citizens Coalition for Cannabis. Since 2010, the members of the Idaho Citizens Coalition have been fighting to legalize marijuana in America's last absolute prohibition state. We believe Idahoans deserve legal access to the cannabis plant in all of its forms. Find out more about the Idaho Citizens Coalition at idahocan.co. That's idahocann.co. And find us on Facebook at IdahoCan.
The Russ Belville Show, where the truth about marijuana gets more than a minute to speak.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Hey, what time are you coming home from school then?
Same time right after school.
Oh, okay.
Bye.
Each day, Maria is cast out upon the land.
Excuse me, you got a minute? You smoke a little cheap or something?
I don't know, he always smokes Buddha and stuff like that.
Don't worry about it. It's a really nice experience.
Look, I'm just not with that.
Why are you getting so upset? Don't worry about it.
Because I don't want to look stupid and strung out like you.
And when she returns from her journey, she is one day stronger, one day wiser, one day freer. Be strong, and you will be free. Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back, everyone. 20 minutes to 5 o'clock here in the Mountain Time Zone, and it's 94 degrees out here in the Treasure Valley. It's hot. They set a record. They set an all-time record in Boise yesterday, like 103 degrees. The second earliest the state has ever gone over 100 degrees. But don't worry, there's no such thing as global climate change. In this segment, we want to take a look back. We are in our 9th anniversary show, and we're looking at the year 2012, the year before marijuana legalization passed, and now what happened after it passed. In Colorado, it ended up getting about 55% of the vote. Here's the reactions of some of the people in charge of the state following that momentous and groundbreaking legalization. In the meantime, I'm just going to go over some random stuff that I've found across the net with respect to this legalization passing. It's been interesting seeing some of the reactions, and the most interesting reaction to me comes from that beer millionaire, the beer millionaire who's the governor of Colorado. His name's John Hickenlooper. That's right, Hickenlooper. And John Hickenlooper made his money on Pyramid Ale. If you've ever had a Pyramid Ale, he's the guy, right? He's the microbrewer, and he's got this big empire out there in Colorado. He's made a ton of money on it, right? So this guy, who's been a beer peddler all his life, made his fortune on beer, has a problem with us passing marijuana legalization. Let me read to you from CNN what he says. Let's see if I can get this whole thing read. Let me find the first one that I saw here. This is on Washington Post blogs for about 15 hours ago. Hickenlooper on the Colorado pot vote. Don't break out the Cheetos. What? So here's what he said. This is from Washington Post. Amendment legalizing recreational marijuana use and sale passed in Colorado Tuesday night, and opposing Governor John Hickenlooper, Democrat, conceded defeat with a warning for the stoners. Quote, "The voters have spoken and we have to respect their will. This will be darn it. It sure sucks when voters do stuff. Isn't that awful? The voters have spoken and we will have to respect their will, even though they did something so stupid as to legalize pot." No, he didn't say that, but anyway. "The voters have spoken and we have to respect their will," Hickenlooper said on Amendment 64. "This will be a complicated process, but we intend to follow through. That said, federal law still says marijuana is an illegal drug, so don't break out the Cheetos or Goldfish too quickly." Ha 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 ha. Hickenlooper. Governor Hickenlooper. All right, so don't break out Cheetos or Goldfish because it's still federally illegal. Right, because none of us have been smoking pot here because we were worried about what the feds thought. Right? You're in a state packed with medical marijuana patients, a medical marijuana amendment, a part of your damn constitution that is blatantly in violation of federal law. Seems like they haven't been worried too much about whether or not they're using pot and what the federal government seems to think about it. Why should we, now that it's legal? And in fact, we have even more reason to celebrate than when the patients got their red cards back in, 2000? Because remember, medical marijuana laws do not mean you're legal. I know a lot of people get that mistaken impression. But if you're a medical marijuana patient, you're not legal. You're exempt from criminal prosecution, right? You are guilty until proven patient is what it is. So we actually have more freedom now. When we say that we're smoking legally, we're really smoking legally, really actually legal. And some of these politicians just can't handle it. They're just heads are starting to explode here. And finding out more stuff out on Huffington Post here. AG Suthers, Attorney General Suthers, out there in Colorado, has also spoken out on this. Colorado's Attorney General has issued a strong and detailed statement about how the amendment might be implemented in the state, and also called out the Department of Justice to make its enforcement intentions known. And here's from the Colorado Attorney General. Despite my strongly held belief that legalization of marijuana on a state level is very bad public policy, voters can be assured that the Attorney General's office will move forward in assisting the pertinent executive branch agencies to implement this new provision in the Colorado Constitution. Well, That bodes well, doesn't it? That gives you a lot of confidence that they're going to follow the will of the voters and the intent there, and they're not going to try to pull some sort of fast one in the way that they structure things to make things tougher on us, right? Despite my strongly held belief that legalization is very bad public policy, I'll implement it. I'll go right ahead and implement it. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Even though it's really bad idea. Even though it's a terrible, terrible idea. Terrible idea, but I'll implement it. Yeah, okay. Let me continue with this statement. Coloradans should be cognizant of two caveats, however. First, the ability of the federal government to criminally sanction possession, use, and distribution of marijuana, even if grown, distributed, and used in a single state, was recognized by the U.S. Supreme Court. Therefore, absent action by Congress, Coloradans should not expect to see successful legal challenges to the ability of the federal government to enforce its marijuana laws in Colorado. Right, okay. He's absolutely right. Right now, the federal government, DEA agents, could come down those stairs right over there for my little bowl of buds. Right now, federal cops, this is a federal crime. This is a felony, federal felony right here. Right now, can do it right now. Here's the problem. They don't have the manpower to do that. There are 10,000 employees in the DEA. 5,000 of them are special agents. 5,000 of them. 26.1 million of us nationwide who are smoking pot annually. 16.1 million nationwide who are smoking pot monthly. And at least 2.5 million who are smoking pot almost every day, like me. So 5,000 special agents. 2.5 million daily tokers. They don't have the resources. What they do tend to focus on is the big scale grower, the big scale seller. If it's over 100 plants, they can get a mandatory minimum that, makes their, nipples hard, whatever. So, that's what they'll focus on. That's what the feds will focus on. And sure, they're going to still do that. They still have the power to do that. But are they? I highly doubt it. Now, the federal government could take it into court and, sue to have an injunction against the commercial scheme, the taxing and regulating and the selling. There ain't a damn thing they can do about the possession. Not a damn thing. The federal government has absolutely zero power to force a state to criminalize something. It cannot go to Colorado and say, no, you really do need to be locking up those guys for less than an ounce. Can't do it. So very worst case scenario, is that we still have legal possession of an ounce, no matter what else happens. Yeah, like they said, they actually, to be fair, Colorado implemented its marijuana legalization without much problem from the governor or the attorney general, but it wasn't so sure a thing at the time. Stay tuned after this break. We've got our radical rant coming up, the tasing of a 78-year-old little old man in Gooding County, Idaho. It's time for Idaho to join the rest of the nation in legalizing medical marijuana. The volunteers at Kind Idaho have proposed the Idaho Medical Marijuana Act and are collecting signatures now to place it on the ballot. Visit kindidaho.org to learn more. Become a volunteer signature gatherer for Kind Idaho to help collect the over 65,000 signatures needed to put medical marijuana on the November 2022 ballot. Polls show it will pass. Please visit kindidaho.org today.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
Okay, maybe you're high too.
And now, Puff Pass Ponder with Radical Russ. An ounce is 28.3495 grams, but legal marijuana stores sell you 28 grams and call it an ounce. Legalization is shorting your bag by over a third of a gram, dude. This has been Puff Pass Ponder with Radical Russ.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to in federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
You tasing old man? You tasing old man? What the fuck is wrong with you? You tasing old fucking man? You tasing old fucking man? Really?
You treating us like this, you worthless piece of shit.
What happened?
You're hearing video from Gooding County, Idaho, where a police deputy tased a 78-year-old man in response to an alleged road rage incident. This is from Wendell, Idaho, which is in the south central portion of the state of Idaho. And according to MagicValley.com reporting on this story, the elderly man was shot with a stun gun and thrown to the ground. And folks, you got to see the picture of this guy. And I wish I had an ability to put this on the video screen, because when I say little old man, I mean little old man. This guy couldn't be more than 5 foot tall. Now, maybe there's a camera angle issue. Maybe he's bent over somehow, but he's little. Like, he's standing up next to a truck, and the top of his head is easily 10 to 12 inches shorter than the top of this little truck, this, one of them small trucks. He's standing next to the deputy. If I assume the deputy's 5'10" to 6 foot tall, then this guy can't be more than 5 foot tall. He's a little old man with a huge contusion up above his right eye, blood running down his cheek. He's wearing a collared shirt and suspenders with jeans, and his jeans are falling down past his butt, probably. He's facing us, so we can't see, but poor little old guy, right? Got thrown to the ground, got handcuffed by this deputy. Now, the deputy, it looks like Officer Big Mac, yeah, huge guy with a big beer gut, and I'm not one to, criticize, but bigger than me for sure. So, what, 6 foot, 6'2", 6'4", this guy might be, 280, 300 pounds maybe. This little old man, 5 foot tall, 78 years old, maybe 115 pounds. So the deputies, police were called. And
look at him.
Here's more of the video. This is the son of the man. John Hall is the man's name.
That's my grandpa. No, I have.
That is my husband, and you are hurting him. You are hurting my
I'm
husband.
unarmed. I'm unarmed. Why don't you just fucking shoot me? I'm unarmed.
Hurting my husband.
I'm unarmed. Fuck, we were getting ready for camping. We were getting ready to go camping.
You do not have any reason to hurt
You're tasing old fucking man. What the fuck?
I'm going to talk to you about it now until you calm down. You calm down and quit hurting my husband.
That's the man's wife, Verla. She ended up getting arrested for interfering with the cop. They are standing far enough away from this cop. He's really got no leg to stand on as far as being interfered with. Now, the news is the deputy has been suspended. The sheriff there in Gooding County told them, and an Ada County officer is reviewing it. This officer apparently is an expert in use of force to determine whether or not this old man, 78-year-old man who's easily half the size of the deputy, should have been tased. Now, how this all came about was dispatch reporting that there was a road rage incident that the old man was a part of. And so what that was all about was, according to the grandson who videotaped this, the cop, the old man was driving his truck, his little pickup truck, down Interstate 84, and a trucker was behind him tailgating him. And so the little old man taps his brakes to let the trucker know, hey, back off. This apparently pissed off the trucker, who ends up following the little old man home, parking down the road, and calling the cops to tell them that this little old man in the pickup was trying to run him off the road, and the little old man had a gun. That causes the Gooding County Sheriff's deputies to show up, all agitated, figuring there's some gunplay they're going to get involved with. And that leads to throwing this old man to the ground and tasering him. Now, the story and I've looked on 3 different news sources here, none of them make any mention as to whether or not there actually was a gun. But they end up arresting not only the grandfather, but also his son, James Hall, was arrested. He was in the truck with the grandfather who was driving. So the 2 men the grandpa and the father get arrested, and the grandson is videotaping the thing because they were on their way home. They were all headed out to a camping expedition. The whole family was going to go camping. They were both shot with tasers, both the grandpa and the dad shot with tasers and cuffed. And neither man was arrested, but they did end up get cuffed and thrown to the ground. And so it just, first of all, if there was no gun involved, that trucker needs to be arrested. His false call to the cops could have gotten that old man killed. Tasing someone, they call it less than lethal force, but it can kill you. Especially if you're 78 years old and maybe don't have the best of heart anymore. And all this unnecessary force for what? Because a trucker calls in a supposed road rage incident and says he sees a guy with a gun. Well, first of all, in the state of Idaho, you can have a gun. In the state of Idaho, they have what they call constitutional carry. Any adult who's not a felon can have a gun, conceal it even, and take it anywhere with them. You can open carry, you can concealed carry. So whether or not, now, if the trucker said that the guy was waving the gun at him, but no, he just said he saw a gun. Well, that's perfectly legal. That's a Second Amendment right, and it's one that's well protected in the state of Idaho. So if he had a gun, are the cops going to react to every call like that where they see someone who has a gun, even if there's no indication that it was being used or pointed or waved at anyone? Then it kind of abrogates your Second Amendment rights. If you got no chance to actually exercise them without getting shot, tased, roughed up, it kind of quiets your want to have a gun around. And like I said, if there was no gun, then that trucker needs to be brought up on charges. And I am one to be more likely to believe that it was the grandpa who was tapping the brakes for the trucker to back off of him, given that he had his son in the car with him to corroborate the story. Now this cop, he's on leave now. They've suspended him and they're investigating the whole use of force. As the news reports are coming out, other people are reacting to the story in the Magic Valley area saying, oh yeah, this guy? Oh yeah, we know this guy. This guy has been a problem for years. And the Gooding County Sheriff has responded that no, they don't have any documentation that he's anything out of the ordinary. But again, when the ordinary is increasingly becoming police acting with impunity and violating people's rights and roughing them up, and in this case, a little old man, well then it's not likely to get reported. Or if it gets reported, it gets buried. Or even if it doesn't get buried, they get off with a slap on the wrist. Or at worst, fired from this department and then they move on to work at some other department. And much of what has changed policing from what it used to be back in the 60s and 70s, we think of the old Adam 12 shows and to protect and serve, has increasingly become to search and seize, to arrest and brutalize, and you can lay that right at the feet of the drug war. That's what turned policing from what it used to be, something that was a little more community-oriented, into something that was profit-oriented, something that became easy arrests of vulnerable people and a tool of governments to be able to keep down leftist and minority power groups that were forming in the 60s and 70s. They admitted to as much. And the tendrils of that drug war have infected, take you all the way to this incident in Idaho with a big, bullying, overweight cop thinking every encounter is going to be shoot at the OK Corral because it's been drilled into their head by their training. All in reaction to the arms race of the drug war. It's time to end it. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. Stay tuned. Hour 2 is next with more highlights from 2012, a preview of the marijuana election night, what marijuana legalization looked like on the very first minute in Seattle, Washington, and a look back at High Time's first ever dabs cover. For everyone here in America's last absolute prohibition state, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!